very welcome back. Well, my next two guests have quite a story to tell, I can tell you. It reads, when you think of it, like something out of a Hollywood movie. He is a professional investigator who relentlessly pursued an American con man for stealing the identities of Irish children who had died at birth. She, on the other hand, is the mother of one of the children involved and was truly shocked to find out what was going on. So to tell us a little bit more about this extraordinary tale, would you welcome, please, David Snow and Anne Conroy, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. So, David, I'll start with you. You might tell me when you first heard the name Jeremy Cochran.
That's a name that certainly puts a shiver down my
yeah?
spine. Absolutely, yeah.
Tell me when you heard the name.
That file would have been referred to me back in January 2009 by a claims manager within the Zurich Insurance Company. And it's a name that I certainly won't forget for a long, long time.
Okay, because you at that time you're doing what for a living?
A financial investigator. I work with the Zurich Insurance Company. Okay. Have done for the past 10 years.
Very good. And what was it about this case that made you so suspicious?
Well, it was a very suspect case from the start. The accident had happened approximately 4 to 6 weeks prior to when it was referred to me. It was an American individual who had been knocked down in Decorah on the early hours of a Sunday morning, and he sustained a pretty traumatic personal injury to his back.
Yes.
But he didn't attend any hospitals here in Ireland, and there was no independent witnesses, the Gardaí, fire brigade, ambulance, nobody attended, and he presented himself at a hospital in the UK.
So you felt this is something. There's a bad smell off this.
Absolutely, I'm in the business. I know I don't look it, but I'm in the business 25 years.
Yeah,
I started when I was 10.
Yeah, so
and it's something that comes to you. It's a natural. It's something that comes to you. It's a sixth sense almost.
And when did you realise that this guy was using fake identities?
Yeah, after a period of about 6 weeks with heavily investigating with Zurich, I realised that one of the identities that he'd used was, in fact, an incorrect identity, we'll call it at this stage.
Yeah.
I contacted my colleagues in North America. Zurich have a fantastic operation over in Dallas, in Texas, and actually a guy, McNulty is the surname, from Mayo.
Happens. Okay, very good.
Yeah. He operates the fraud department for Zurich and Dallas.
Yeah.
It turned out that this guy Mr. Cochran seemed to have a problem with remembering who he actually was, and he had a multiple of identities in the United States. So that straight away said there's something completely wrong here.
Okay, so you hear about somebody who has multiple identities, and you must ask yourself, how do they attain this amount of fraud, if you like?
This particular situation was quite sad and horrendous. What he'd actually done was he'd obtained the identities of Irish children, Irish babies, who died around the time of his own birth, circa 1975-76. So what he'd actually done was, Jeremy Cochran is from Dallas, Texas. He travelled over here to Ireland. He basically got the names of children who died around the time of his own birth, 1975-76. And anybody can do it. Go into births, deaths, and marriages, €10, and you can get a full birth certificate of the individual.
And where would you get the names? How would you?
Well, there's two theories on that. I know myself, I thought it was from actually headstones and graveyards, but the Gardaí believe that it was actually from births, deaths and marriages themselves, because there's a list of people who die going back over the years.
Okay, but what, working on one theory is that he could go into a graveyard and see a child had a very short life, or might have been stillborn or what have you.
Stillborn, yeah.
Stillborn, and then he can say, with that information, say, I am this person. So it's a kind of very ghoulish theft.
It's a very, very evil crime. It's a very fiendish crime to carry out. And what's more sinister about this was, when he was getting the Irish birth certificates, he was then applying for a PPS number in that name, and worst of all, he was getting official Irish passports in the name.
In the name of dead.
Absolutely, of someone who died 35, 36 years ago. And having the passport permitted him to open DeVita anti-money laundering legislation and open bank accounts, and then he set about ripping off insurance companies operating in this market.
Okay, so it's quite an elaborate. I mean, it's something that you might expect to see in The Day of the Jackal, if you recall.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That you'd think might be a work of fiction in that sense. But here he was, acting it out.
This, with respect, Ryan, this was no fiction. This was reality, and a very painful reality.
You used the word painful, but because I know that this idea of somebody stealing the theft of a baby has a personal effect on you deeply, and possibly informed your keenness of investigation.
Absolutely. It's well known amongst my colleagues and friends that 10 years ago, actually this November, sadly, my own son Andrew was stillborn.
I'm sorry.
He died at birth. Very, very traumatic situation.
Of course it was.
Basically, what Cochrane had done, it lit a point with me that I said, this guy's got to be stopped. Bad enough that he was taking our children's identities, but he was taking official Irish passports in the names of the children who had passed away. And that was, I wasn't going to allow any Texan cowboy come over here and do that. I was quite
determined, I think is a word that I can see it in your face.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was quite determined that this guy had to be stopped. And as I said about doing so.
Okay, well, we'll get to the pursuit, the chase in a moment. But Anne, I want to welcome you into the programme now more formally and ask you about the phone call that you received from the Gardaí a few years ago. Will you tell me about that?
Well, we received a phone call from the guards in Boyle. I had a second son after I lost my first one, and I named him Peter. And he went off to work in Galway.
Yes.
And the phone call came anyway, and my husband went to the barracks, and they said that Peter had gone into a hardware store in Galway and bought a chainsaw or a console.
Yeah.
And the guards in Galway wanted to speak to him. So I rang Peter in Galway and I explained to him what the guards was after saying to us. And he kind of thought I was, making all this up.
Yeah.
So he went to the guards' barracks anyway, and they brought him to the hardware store, and the owner of the store said it wasn't him, that the cheque had bounced, but it wasn't our Peter that had signed the cheque. So Peter, anyway, went off. They were happy with that, and they let Peter go. And an hour later, we received a phone call from the guards' barracks in Galway, telling us that even though it wasn't Peter, it all seemed to come back to our address. The cheques that was signed by this man had come back.
Yeah.
But they asked me for Peter's date of birth, and I gave it to them. And they said that wasn't the date of birth they had. So then they asked me, did the 22nd of March 1975 mean anything to us? And I said, yes, it was a son that we lost at birth.
By the same name.
By the same name. And he the guardian that was on the phone to me was kind of shocked. But he said, give him a few days and he'd investigate it more, which he did. And he came back to me and he told me that it was my dead son's identity that was being used. And also by being used, he had a bank account in his name, a checkbook in his name, a flat in Dublin in his name, a passport in his name, and a car in his name.
What are you thinking when you're told this?
I was horrified to think that somebody could do something like this to a child that only lived for 2 days and that fought hard for them 2 days to live. And we were very young when we had our first child. And we went through an awful lot, both my husband and I. But thank God we have 7 children now. And we still think of Peter, but I think it's an awful thing for any one person to do.
Just listening to you and watching you talking, it feels like a desecration.
It's terrible.
Would that be right to say?
Yeah. It really hurt our
A violation,
family.
really.
Yes, yeah, it did.
And
To think that some man could do this.
Yeah.
He actually has destroyed my son's identity.
And had you any notion at all before that such a
No.
thing was possible? No.
I didn't. I thought actually if a child dies and you go looking for a birth certificate for that child, that it'll state that child is deceased and that more questions can be asked before that birth certificate is given out.
Let's go back then to the case and the search for Cochrane.
Yeah.
You became, am I right in saying, consumed by the case?
It took over my life, Ryan.
Did it really? In what
obsessed.
sense? In what sense, David?
I've always been in the investigation arena in one way, shape or form. And I'd worked in the States. I'd worked for the Pinkerton investigation company. So I had plenty of contacts in the States. So I was able to trace this guy and track him. And I actually took the opportunity at my own cost and expense to go over to Texas and meet up with some contacts out in Dallas. And I was up in Oklahoma. I was doing things where I'd be getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning, looking at Facebook, Google, checking accounts, trying to get information. 2 fantastic Garda detectives in our own Garda Bureau of Fraud, who I must mention, Detective Sergeant Katrina Gunn and Detective Des Risman, who had the painful task, I might add, of going to tell there was actually six parents who had the tragedy of losing children and then having their identity stolen some 35 years later. So a horrendous act for these Gardaí to have to do.
Horrendous, because it is such an obscenity for a
it's
child
pure
that you
evil.
thought would be, the expression is rest in peace.
Absolutely.
And that to be, it's like kicking the grave over, really, isn't it?
It's pure evil. It's a crime, and you know, I just became so passionately involved with it that this Texas cowboy had to be stopped.
Well, tell me about him. What sort of a profile between the guards here and your friend McNulty over in the States? What sort of a profile were you building of
He's
him
a
as?
professional. He's a professional con man. He's a professional, according to the district attorney's office in Oklahoma. They described him as a serious con artist, somebody who specialises in writing bad paper in the States, which to you and me is bouncing checks.
Okay.
Ripped off a lot of insurance companies here in Ireland. Was it
So a serial offender in this field.
Professional con artist. You
Okay.
know,
And then we go to Dublin Airport, where you caught up with him. What do you think was the key piece in the puzzle that helped you get your hands on the guy?
The identities that we'd obtained using the Irish system, Risk Intelligence Insurance Link, which is what insurance companies use in Ireland for checking data on various claims, all his identities and addresses we were able to match. And working with the Garda Bureau of Fraud, the airlines were tipped off, the passport office was tipped off, and he actually arrived in the passport office the day before to get another passport when the Gardaí were alerted by the passport office. And he was arrested in Dublin Airport, travelling under the identity of a child who died 35 years ago on an official Irish passport, trying to travel on a Ryanair flight back to Poland.
He was nabbed at last.
Oh, we got him, yeah.
Did he confess? Did he?
Yeah, he was taken to the Garda station, and after a day or two, we realised that the game was up, and he confessed to, I believe it was 35 charges thereabouts.
Okay. You know, people always say you want your day in court. You had your day in court. You met him. You saw him, I should say. When you were there, were you? And it's probably the wrong word, but were you excited? Were you delighted that this time?
Anybody going to court will tell you it's very apprehensive. Not as bad as this, I might add, but it's
in a different world.
In a different world, you know, attending the Circuit Criminal Court in Dublin to give evidence, and thankfully, one thing he did do, which spared a lot of pain to the parents, was he pleaded guilty to the accounts of various counts of fraud.
Yeah.
And you know, the guy he has a very, very strong look of our famous Irish actor Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
He's a good-looking guy, to be fair to him, you know, and I think that's what probably tweaked him in the end. Because
the bit of charm, he was able to get by on the bit of charm.
Absolutely,
there he is. There,
absolutely.
Yeah,
so it was a fantastic feeling to.
Did you talk to him?
I did. Just at the end,
What
I just
did you
said
say?
to him, "Jeremy, just best of luck to you." And he hadn't met me before. He'd spoken to me on the phone a couple of times. The only he realised was me he'd been talking to. But I said, "Very best of luck to you, Jeremy." He said, "Who are you?" And I said, "No, the question is, who are you?"
Well, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
What sentence did he get?
Well, this being Ireland, of course, he got a very lenient sentence, 4 years jail.
4 years.
4 years. And I might add, folks, in the United States, it's a federal offence to copy a passport or to use a passport. You're looking at a minimum sentence, non-negotiable, 20 years. And if you use a passport for fraudulent gain, it carries an additional 5.
How many years did he serve in an Irish prison?
Well, 4 years in Ireland usually at minimum means divided in 2. So I think in total he was arrested in the January, released, deported back to the United States the June of the following year. So 16, 17 months in jail.
Well, in jail. And then he was deported home to freedom?
Well, he was deported. He was handed over to US immigration in Dublin Airport. He flew American Airlines to Chicago. There's a Google, if you want to Google his name, Jeremy Cochran, it comes up busted. There's a really nice picture. I have a mouse mat in my office with his,
I bet you do.
with his picture on it. And, you know, I'd done my part. I couldn't do any more than what I'd done, you know.
Did you find an emotional experience watching him being sentenced, albeit for the little bit that he was?
At the time, I was elated with the sentence.
Were you?
Because it was great to see justice finally served. But the day after, I remember dropping my 2 children to school who should be in bed.
But aren't.
Be watching this. Olivia and Sarah, hello.
Yeah,
I hope you're in bed. No swimming tomorrow if you're not. And basically, I remember reading the Metro Herald, and it said a man steals dead tots' identities, and that just ripped my heart apart. It really did. It brought me back to horrendous experience that I'd had with my own son who died,
course.
and it really, really upset me. I found it very disturbing.
Did you, Anne, feel tempted to go to court to see this man?
Yes, I did.
And what part of you wanted to go to court, and for what reason?
I wanted to go, not to see him. I wanted kind of to go and give him a slap across the face for what he had done. I really did.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you consider it for
Yeah.
real?
Yes, but I changed my mind
Why?
because I felt he didn't deserve. He'd done enough to me and to people like me. And I was very annoyed that he didn't serve his 4 years. Very, very annoyed.
And when you heard the sentence and how did you feel when you heard that it was 4 years, which was always going to be reduced anyway?
It should have been a lot more, but I knew he wouldn't. I kind of knew he wouldn't serve the 4 years if he had other crimes in America.
Does his capture and subsequent punishment give you some peace of mind
A little.
for your son?
Yeah, but my son's identity is destroyed.
Do you think so?
Yes, I do.
You can't take any peace of
No,
mind that
I
he's
can't.
been
He
caught?
destroyed it.
Really?
And I'm sure the other parents would feel the same.
Yeah.
He destroyed our children that didn't get a chance to live in this world.
That's a desperate legacy for somebody to have to live with and for this man to have left.
It's absolutely horrendous, you know.
Yeah.
And as I said on the outset, you know, like the insurance fraud, we see crimes every day of the week between cars getting stolen,
Yeah.
etc. You know, but to steal the innocence of an identity of something so pure as a baby who has sadly passed on, I must congratulate Kelly on her beautiful baby.
Yeah, gorgeous little lad, yeah.
You're quite good at holding babies.
Thanks,
aren't you?
I'm often left doing such a thing.
To take that from the parents like Anne and other people, Frank Gibney, I believe, is in the audience, you know, to take that and to do that, it's pure evil.
Yeah. And what about him now? Can he go off and chance his arm across
Well,
in the
according
States?
to my sources in the United States, I believe he's back in Dallas. You know, he's a free man. He can do what he wants to do.
Yeah. Is it common in Ireland? I mean, you're talking about the one man being caught,
Yeah.
but identity theft, it's something I wasn't aware of up until now.
Identity theft is a massive problem in the United States. It's the fastest growing white collar crime
Is it?
in the United States. Yeah, according to the FBI, it's a major problem in the United States. It's growing in Ireland. It's very much growing in Ireland.
Made easier by, I would imagine,
Facebook.
Internet, Facebook. Why
Absolutely.
did you say Facebook immediately?
Well, Facebook, and guilty myself,
Yeah.
you put a lot of personal data up there, you know, and it's very easy for people to log on. If you haven't adjusted your security setting, and that's nothing against Facebook, it's a fantastic company and a fantastic
Well, if you buy a book on
organisation.
Amazon, aren't you giving in your
Absolutely, you're
credit
giving
card
in
and everything else?
absolutely. But to be fair to Amazon, which is where my book is available, actually, it's very
good.
secure.
I'll
it's
mention
very,
that
very
in a sec.
secure.
Is it?
Thank you.
So
yeah,
you have
it's
to be
very
careful
secure.
about the security of the sites you use.
Absolutely, and you know, if ever you are buying anything online, there should be look for the little. There's at the bar at the top. There's a little like a little padlock. Always go with that, and be careful of the sites you're buying from as well.
Yeah.
Amazon's pretty okay.
And these are the things. And also, I suspect you've got to be careful generally in what you're giving to people, information.
Very careful. Be very careful with the information that you're passing out to people, and in particular with the internet. The internet is a major tool and a resource. So be
Tread
careful.
carefully with
Tread
it.
very carefully.
David Snow and Conroy, thank you so much for joining us with your story
Thank you.
tonight. It's nice to see you both. Thank you. Thanks. Well done, man. Thank you, Dave. Okay, some sage advice there, I have to say. David's book entitled Someone Has Taken My Place, which is based on the Jeremy Cochran story so eloquently explained this evening, is available from davidsnow.ie and, of course, as mentioned, on Amazon. Let me just say quickly.